Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, I have Scott Horton on the show. I wanted to get Scott Horton back on to get kind of updated on what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. We spend most of the time focused on the economics around the war and how we see corporations acting in concert with the government, and how this is becoming painful for ordinary Americans and ordinary people in real time, and that there's not this delayed recession behind it, but that it's all happening in real time, and it's creating such inflationary problems and gas prices to go up and all that good jazz. So we get into that a little bit. We talk a little bit about Alexander Dugin's idea, the cause for the war, where the war may be going. Then we also talk a little bit about Iran shooting missiles into Iraq. So I think this is, as always, a great episode with Scott. I think y'all will get a lot out of it. I certainly enjoyed myself, as always. So, enjoy the show. RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs, and check out all the other stuff the little techie's doing as an independent tech organized worker guy thing, whatever he's doing. He's doing all kinds of cool stuff. He's gone independent, so he's only working for himself, so he's contracting out all sorts of tech work. So if you need any tech work done, get in touch with Ryan Bunting at RyanBunting.com and check out his book, Project Manicore. The LibertarianInstitute.org is where you can find podcasts like this one, as if you didn't already know that. Sheldon Richman's a writer, not a podcaster. I'm sorry. I'm still drinking coffee here this morning. Patrick McFarland with Liberty Weekly. Kyle Anzalone with Conflicts of Interest. Keith Knight with Don't Tread on Anyone. And The Scott Horton Show. Also, we have great writers like Sheldon Richman. I'm struggling with names here. We published Ryan McMakin there, Jim Bovard, lots of other guys, and I'm just drawing a blank. Sometimes even Ron Paul articles get put up at the libertarianinstitute.org. So go to the libertarianinstitute.org to keep up with all the greatest thinkers in the movement. As always, thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show.
I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I need to start
drama.
drinking, man. It's my problem. I'd probably be a lot happier if I was.
All right, so we got this situation now with Ukraine and Russia, and it's not really with Ukraine so much. I mean, Russia's bombing the shit out of Ukraine and killing a bunch of fucking people. I feel horrible for the civilians being drug into this entire mess. Because they had
more than 500 killed already, for sure.
It's horrible. I feel terrible for them. I don't ever want civilians bombed and killed for any reason whatsoever. And the U.S. is laying down these sanctions, and then these corporatists jump on the bandwagon and start shutting down McDonald's that Russians immediately open back up because they know how to make the burgers. And they put sanctions on the SWIFT system, and then they start attacking the oil and gas system. Now, this is the first time in my lifetime that I can remember. Maybe I it's very possible I'm overlooking something, but it's the first time in my lifetime that I can remember that U.S. overseas actions have actually come back and in such a direct manner, right? Not like in 9/11 with a blowback scenario, but there's a direct blowback on the American people and on the citizenry.
Like on all of us at once in the form of the higher prices.
Exactly,
now. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I can't think of another time that U.S. intervention overseas has ever done that.
Well, when Bush started the terror war, gas went up. It had been $1 a gallon, and it went up to 2.5, and eventually 3 there at the peak of that. I think. I forgot. I think it went up. I forgot how much. Certainly above $100 a barrel.
Okay.
For a little while there, and I'll tell you, I think part of my I'm lucky in this way. I'm not bragging, just boasting about how charmed I am. And I just happen to find out and understand the direct correlation and causation between inflationary money and war. And I got that really from the John Birch Society. And these guys are right-wing nationalist, patriotic constitutionalist Americans. They are. People call them very right-wing, like they're very, very right, like nationalist, racist types or something. I think that's really not true. I think they're very, very conservative. But anyway, G. Edward Griffin in his book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, he just draws this direct connection between inflationary money and war. And it's probably a too conspiratorial take about just how exactly directly connected each thing in the chain is. But nah, pretty much not. And you look at the guys who got the Federal Reserve Act passed, it was J.P. Morgan's men. And they were, in fact, the same guys who got us into World War I. It was the same real kind of coterie of people there. And at the end of the war, they were the founders of the Council on Foreign Relations and, the new consensus about American foreign policy and that establishment that they started to build then. And, I am far from a mathematician or Austrian school economist at all, man. As Lou Rockwell might say about someone else in a different circumstance, as an economist, I'm a great anti-war guy. But I do know kind of rudimentary stuff here, such as you can trace a direct boom and bust cycle correlation with each and every American war since the foundation of the central bank. And there's a little bit of a caveat there for Korea. And I think they kind of, figured out how to offset the consequences of their inflation in different ways then. And they built up a big nuke force instead of an army that was supposed to be, counter-inflationary or something. But anyway, for World War I, of course, it led to the Great Crash of 21 that all the Austrians know about because that was the Great Depression that came and went without notice because no one intervened to fix it. It just fixed itself because that's how it's supposed to work. Then, of course, you had the Great Crash of the 20s, which was an inflationary boom, first of all, but especially as a favor to the British to help prop up the pound by debasing the dollar. And so that was for the British warfare state, but that led to the boom and the bust and the crash of 29. And then, of course, all the interventions of the New Deal led the Great Depression to continue. And, David Stockman, I'll take his word for it, man. I don't know if you know that much about him, but the guy's a brilliant genius. Reagan's former budget director and one of the greatest libertarian writers and economists we have right now.
I think I've heard him on your show before. Yeah.
Yeah. So he swears to God that the Great Depression was over before FDR was inaugurated in 33. We had the crash in 29. We had all the bad debts being liquidated in 30 and 31 and, whatever different things going on through 32. By the time homeboy was inaugurated in 33, the whole thing was over. We're ready to start another inflationary boom again. And then here comes the new dealers. Just ruin everything. Anyway, I'm getting bogged down in how much I hate FDR. But the point being that there was a massive inflationary boom and then bust from the Second World War. Although you had so many people coming home from Europe and so much of the New Deal repealed and government money going directly into manufacturing to kind of spur that growth, that kind of helped ameliorate from the crash. Ron Paul talks about this. There was a crash in 46, but it was over pretty quickly. In fact, one time South Park showed a Republican debate and Ron Paul was there in the debate, and they had like a South Park version of Ron Paul, and that was his line. And it was like real audio of Ron. You could hear it. And he goes, "Why don't we just look at after World War II? All the men came home from World War II, and we didn't have a depression then because we allowed the thing to whatever." It was just, sorry, we're recording this at night, and I'm kind of high.
It is night.
But anyway, so then you had Korea. As I said, they inflated for the Korean War, but they balanced, the budget in other ways or whatever, had kind of deflationary policies at the same time. But then the Vietnam War had a massive bubble that crashed really I think it popped in 68. And that helped lead to the rise of the Republicans and Richard Nixon. But this led to the stagflationary policy of all through the 1970s. Where they just kept inflating and inflating and inflating and tried to not let the correction ever come. Of course, Nixon in 71 took us off the gold standard entirely. And because of the bread and as they put it, the guns and butter of the Great Society welfareism, along with the war in Southeast Asia, cost so much, they had to just abandon the gold standard so they could keep printing that money to pay for it all.
Right.
And then that led to this stagflation through the 70s. Then Paul Volcker came and raised interest rates way up through the roof at the end of the 70s and into the 80s. That helped destroy Jimmy Carter's presidency. It wasn't the Iran hostage crisis, man. It was the interest rates. People were just dying. It was, any Austrian could have told you, we need a recession. Allow a recession to take hold, right? Let interest rates go up or something. But no, Paul Volcker just raised him up to 25% with police power and just put the entire economy in a stranglehold in order to finally defeat the inflation that the Fed had caused in the first place, of course. Anyway, so then you have not quite a war, but you have the Reagan buildup. It's a massive deficit financed military spending campaign of brinksmanship against the Soviets in the first half of the 1980s. And so after the Volcker term was up and they started relaxing and lowering interest rates again, you had a big inflationary boom there, and that helped disguise the cost of the military buildup. But then that led to the crash of 88. It was not a hot war, but it was that massive buildup in spending for the Cold War and all those new nuclear arms, the arms race with the commies that did that. Then W. Bush comes in, H.W. Bush is president. Goes to war in Iraq, and that he has an inflationary bubble for that. But that crashes in 1991, which is part of how he lost in 92. Bill Clinton ran on it's the economy, stupid, because the economy sucked because George H.W. Bush had inflated a big bubble to make the war in Iraq seem free, but then it popped. And it was on the downswing right at election time. And of course, Ross Perot didn't help and all of that. But anyway, then Bill Clinton, he has smaller hot wars. I mean, he's bombing Iraq the whole time, and he's intervening, in Haiti and in different places in Latin America and in Africa and things. But he's also just expanding America's military footprint all around the globe as well, and continuing to build up where Bush Sr. had vastly cut our nuclear bomber force and all these things. Bill Clinton went ahead with the F-35 and with new nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers and all of these things and military bases around the world. And so then that all resulted in all that inflationary money was built up in the dot-com bubble and all of that in the stock market and in housing and in techs, that 2 out of 3 of those crashed in 99 and 2000. Remember when W. Bush came in, he goes, hey, this is the Clinton recession, the Clinton recession. I just got here. You can't blame me for how bad the economy is now. That's because of Bill Clinton. We're going to fix that. Well, that was kind of true. It was the depression, the recession had been from before he got there. But then what happened? Well, September 11th happened. And September 11th happened to the financial district in New York when we were already in a recession anyway. And it was hijacked airliners that did it. Some of the most expensive and most powerful and high revenue corporations in America, the airlines, all took this massive hit from travel after that. And all those major financial firms in New York had to pick themselves up off of their asses after that. And so when we should have been going even to like a further recession, just as the natural order of things, our economy was in a recession anyway. And then something really bad happened to us that would cost a bunch of money and a bunch of opportunity costs and all kinds of terrible, negatives on our economy. But what they do, they just started printing money. And Alan Greenspan lowered interest rates to 0% and just said, that's it. Money's free. And any big enough bank that does bad business will keep you in business. Just vote Republican, man. Support the war. And that was how they did it. And then, of course, that led to the crash of 2008, that whole terror war. 5 years later, inflation's getting out of control. We better start raising interest rates. And then blam, the whole world economy is taken down with the size of the bubble that they had generated on Wall Street, with all the inflation that they had created in order to, magically somehow solve the recession with paper money. And then that led to, really they call it the Great Recession, just because you're not allowed to call it a depression. It was a depression. 2008, 2009.
I never even hear
2010.
I always hear him call it the financial crisis. I never even hear him call it the Great Recession.
Yeah, because that's right. Because the financial crisis sounds like it hit a bunch of skyscrapers in New York, right? Or a depression and a recession sounds like it happened to you. And so it's all, I guarantee you, right, that they shopped this in front of some, Madison Avenue public relations firm to make sure we don't want to call it this. We want to call it that. Want to make it sound like, oh yeah, poor insurance salesman in New York City got wiped out. I remember that. When what really happened was your next door neighbor blew his brains out when the company he worked for went out of business and he couldn't take care of his wife and she died.
I heard a story. I heard a story. I don't remember who it was. Could have been Dave Smith, but I don't think it was. I think it was somebody else. They were talking about somebody they knew that had bought a big plot of land, and they were planning on building a house, their dream house. They were like in their 60s or 70s. They were going to build their dream house on this plot of land, and we hit the recession in 2008, and they lost everything, and they were never able to build the house. And their wife died, but they still had the land, so they just kept going there every day and taking care of the yard as if they had built a house there. Yeah. I mean, just sad, like just really sad. So sad.
Man, I'm telling you, listen, I'm glad that you interrupt here stop me here. I don't mean to say it like that, but just stop me here to focus on that. Is because, all of just what I outlined there very poorly, but more or less correctly. You could check my work with the greats like Higgs and Murphy and others. That you're talking mostly about, I'm not exactly sure all the percentages, but I think that it's, roughly half the society is considered working class or poor, as opposed to middle class or upper middle class. Middle is really above middle. You know what I mean? Yeah. Working class, low skilled wage earners in America make up just a huge percentage of everybody. It's most of everybody. I'm not sure how much more than 50%, but I'm pretty sure it's more than 50%. Right. And so these people, it's just pulling the rug out from under them. and middle class people too. I mean, the small business owners and all kinds of different people suffer. But of course, the people who are lowest on the economic ladder, as they put it, they fall the hardest. It's not a perfect analogy, is it? The ladder. But so the thing is, where the rubber meets the road, man, is it's dudes blowing their brains out.
Yeah.
And in 2009, the crash happened, toward the end of 08. So this is really through the end of 08, and then especially really beginning in 09 and into 10. A guy like me who does nothing but read the news all the time, that it's going to help. It's just everywhere. It's just an absolute epidemic of murder suicides. And it's essentially a guy kills his wife and his kids and then himself. And it's because he lost his job down at the plant, or he lost his plant that he owned. But usually it was a worker who lost his job because of the depression, not because anything he did wrong, not because anything his bosses did wrong, but because of central government manipulating the currency policy. Mm-hmm. He lost his job. Now he doesn't have health care, so he can't take care of his family. And then one of them dies, and he can't even afford the funeral, and he doesn't know what the hell to do. He doesn't have anyone to turn to. He doesn't have a community in his town anymore. And so he just kills his own family. I just saw it over and over and over again. Dude, shoot his own son and daughter in the head, and then his own wife in the head, and then blow his own brains out and leave a note behind like, I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And, these poor guys think it's their fault that they failed. They let down their people, and they're not a man the way that they were supposed to be. Well, it's not their fault at all. It's not their fault at all.
Yeah.
It was done to them, but there's no one even there to tell them that. There's no one even there to say, no, man, go to Mises.org, dude. This is because of fucking Ben Bernanke did this to you, dude. You're a bystander here, bro. Yeah. This isn't your fault. You can find a way, but it's that guilt that comes with it. And so it's a really bad time. And now all the hoity-toities up there in New York City, they don't have to give a damn about that. I mentioned Paul Volcker in that book, The Secrets of the Temple. It's the story of how brutal that forced recession was when he raised interest rates up to 25% at one point, I think. Very close to that anyway. And just forced this brutal recession on people. Now, they screw you coming or going. So this is going, right? This is after they created the giant boom. Now they got to create the horrible crash for you. Mm-hmm. And they kept statistics, Tommy, of here's how many bankruptcies we have. Here's how many divorces we have. Here's how many foster kids or, kids are going into the system, and they keep these stats, and it's the Federal Reserve. So they got a lot of bean counters to keep track of all those stats from all 50 states. And they would talk to each other about it at the Fed meetings and say, Jesus, the number of divorces and suicides and foster cares and whatever is just through the roof right now. It's so high. Look at the social damage that we're causing. Can't we relax? Now, this is like the liberal supposed side of the argument. Can't we relax our forced recession a little bit? And then to Volcker and the rest of the team, no. The higher part of virtue and valor is to let the American people suffer as much as they must to do the right thing for the country overall. This is our mandate. We must get inflation under control. And so this is how we do it.
I'm waiting for Biden to say that about the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. Like, the highest part of virtue and value is to let the American people suffer, as much as they
pretty close to that already, right?
Yeah.
Kamala Harris
when you said it, I was like, that's exactly what they're telling us.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. It's the price of democracy. Yeah. They call it the Putin price hike, right? So, and to get to that, there's a little bit of truth to that, right? In the sense that,
there is to an extent, and
yeah,
I do want to dig into that a little bit. So sure. Go ahead with what you were going to say, because I do have some questions to ask you about that article I sent you the other day.
Oh, I'm not sure if I remember the article, but I'll say real quick that, look, if if a winter storm comes and wipes out Florida's oranges, the price of orange juice goes way up this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If wildfires destroy all the wheat and corn in the Midwest somehow, yeah, we're going to have distorted prices in those sectors. No question about that. Okay. So what happens though is we have widespread monetary and price inflation. We have bubbles in certain sectors, but we've just got widespread price inflation across the board in everything now, you know? So then you have also secondary temporary disruptions like war in the breadbasket of Europe. And Russia and Ukraine both produce a ton of grain to feed the world. And Russia also is a major exporter of hydrocarbons. I'm sorry?
I said, and fertilizer.
Yeah, and fertilizer comes from the hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
It's all oil-based. And so, you know, Russia is a huge exporter of natural gas and oil. And all that is being disrupted by all the sanctions. So you have massive inflationary pressure around the world from all the countries locked down and printed money. You have all of that inflation. Then you have severe constrictions in, you know, these are the excuses then that the Democrats hide behind for the monetary inflation, right? Like, no, this is all because some goofball screwed up the supply chains in China during the pandemic, or this is all because some screwball mismanaged the supply chains at the port of Long Beach, or this is all because Putin invaded Ukraine and put all that grain in jeopardy of being able to be harvested and gotten to market to on time this year. And because of all the sanctions and restrictions, that's now caused a price spike in fuel. So now if you're a Democrat, of course, this is all because of the war. This is all because of Putin. And if you're going hungry, if there's bread riots in Cairo or whatever it is, it's all Putin's fault. Just look at him. Doesn't he look evil to you? All right, then. And then they get to avoid responsibility for their part in all this. So again, it's just like a winter storm, a freak winter storm wipes out Florida's orange crop. That's equivalent to Russia invading Ukraine, right? It's a crazy ass thing that happens that disrupts supply chains and increases prices incredibly in certain sectors due to the, you know, relatively freak occurrence, right? But so then that's both sides of it, right? There's some truth to the blame that they're giving the intervention, but then you also have to look at who's pointing their fingers and what they have to hide and why it's in their interest to obfuscate and pretend that everything is everybody else's fault but theirs, like usual, you know?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm really like watching, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around is the narrative coming from both sides. I think they're all wrong. I don't know if they're intentionally wrong, but I think they're all wrong. I'm watching it, and so like one of the things I decided to start doing, and I started reading Alexander Dugin, and I was like, okay, this guy, like, he's the only philosopher I know of that has sanctions put on him. He's supposed to be one of Putin's brains, you know, like he's like, I've heard him referred to as Putin's brain. So I'm like, okay, what is this guy saying about what's going on? And this was the article I sent you, was he wrote an article, and it's I don't remember the exact title, but it's something along the lines, war is good for Russia. And he's very much a nationalist, a czarist, even in the traditional sense of the Russian czarist empire. So I'm reading him and I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, if this guy is actually like in Putin's ear, what is he telling Putin? What is he doing? What is happening? And it seems to me, at least from what I'm gathering from what I'm reading from this guy, is that what they think they are doing, which is possibly correct, is kind of like a reversal of what the United States did to the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So it appears to me like these sanctions are what they want, because it's choking off the Western financial system. It's choking off the supply chain. It's creating economic depressions and issues across the board. Whereas if you look into what's been going on with Russia, they just signed a deal with China to sell coal to them for the next like 100 years or some shit like that. They're selling liquid nitrogen gas or liquid natural gas to them coming out of Antarctica for the next 30 years. So they have these huge economic plans they have already set up with China. So the financing, they're not losing their financing. What they did is they subsidized what they would possibly lose by signing these deals with China. And then they signed this bigger deal with China that they were to be partners on the global stage with no restrictions. And I'm like, okay, like, and Alexander Dugin wrote in that article, we're not adhering to a unipolar world anymore. We are introducing NATO and the West to the fact that it is a multipolar world now. And I'm like, okay, this is a big deal. Why are we ignoring this? I mean, like, this sounds like strategically, it sounds like something that you would see somebody reaching for power do.
Well, look, I mean, I think ultimately the Americans agree with him about that. The Americans would rather kick Russia out of Europe than have Germany and Russia get along and not need us anymore. They would rather see Russia turn away against China and then screw it, we'll just have a Cold War against both. And then the gamble is that whatever they can sell to China isn't going to make up for what they could have sold to us or our allies in the West. And so, you know, it'll all be counterproductive in the end. You know, I think the thing about Dugin that I find most interesting is this whole thing about reincorporating all the Russian-speaking peoples, if not the countries that, you know, the entire countries that they live in, and incorporating all the non-Russians too. But at the very least, reabsorbing the Russian parts of the Baltic states and Ukraine, for example.
Yeah.
Now,
he's talking about making like a Slavic nation. Like,
here's the thing. So, you know, Putin has said for years that the fall of the Soviet Union was a tragedy. Now, he didn't mean the fall of Soviet communism and Marxism and the totalitarian state.
Right.
He's a conservative and a Christian, right? But what he meant was the Russian Empire as it was under the USSR. And that, geez, not only did they give up Poland and I guess they didn't dominate Czechoslovakia, but they did. I was thinking of Yugoslavia. Sorry. Not only did they give up Poland and Czechoslovakia and the Warsaw Pact states, but they even gave up the Baltic states and Belarus and Ukraine to be independent. Now, the case is just as obvious as it could be that essentially, this was regretful. But the problem was the Americans made it worse than regretful. The Americans insisted on making it intolerable. So you have people who say that, look, Putin just wants to do this and he'll make up any excuse and invoke any excuse to do it. But just look at the calendar. This guy's been in power for 20 years, 22. He could have done this at any time. Or, 10 years ago. Don't tell me that he's more scared of Obama than he's scared of Biden.
I don't think that's what it is. That's what I was going to ask.
And even, look, one more thing. Even when he took Crimea in 2014, Barack Obama said, this is not part of any grand strategy of Putin's to reincorporate the lost anything. This is a reaction, to paraphrase, from the position I put him in. Me and Biden, we overthrew the government in Kiev and put in anti-Russian forces there. So then he reacted to that by seizing Crimea. So, in other words, it's sort of like, say Dugin has written Putin's Mein Kampf here about, boy, if I really could have whatever I wanted, this is what I would do. You know what I mean? But then look at Putin's actual behavior. And does it seem like he's actually hell-bent on incorporating all the Russian speakers in Ukraine? No, just the Far East and the Donbass. The rest of even the Russian speakers east of the Dnieper don't seem to really want to be occupied by him. And he seems to at least be thinking carefully about whether he wants to keep the entire East or just the Donbass. So we don't know for sure yet. But that clearly is, it is not clear cut that he is just saying, that's it, I'm reincorporating ethnic Russians wherever I find them right now. Now, the problem is, though, Tommy, that he could, see, again, look, go look at his declaration of war on February 21st and February 24th. And he makes a very compelling case. Now, I'm not saying one that justifies it to me. I'm not saying it's reasonable to me, like I would sign off on it. But I'm saying he makes a very rational case.
Yes.
That America gave him no choice but to do this. He says, listen, essentially, we tried to let Ukraine have independence, but evidently there's no such thing as Ukrainian independence. Right now, they're a colony of the United States of America with a puppet regime in Kiev. Well, that's just true. That is true. And so what he's saying was, you know what? We tried to leave good enough alone, but you wouldn't let good enough alone. You insist. And as we've talked about for years on this show, as I know you already know the story, going back for years, long before the current conflict here, that the entire game from the point of view of the Americans was to take Ukraine away from Russia. That was the way they put it. This wasn't about what the Ukrainians wanted. This is about what all can America do to screw the Russians. There's a great Rand Corporation study that has this whole laundry list of things that we can do. Support the rebels in Syria. Support color-coded revolution in Belarus. Support more arms into Ukraine. See what we can do in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to stir up trouble there. And that's how the Americans are, man. They're just relentless. Remember, a year ago, Biden tried to overthrow the government in Belarus, right in the middle of all this tension. And look where Belarus is. This is, Ukraine is the second most important country to Russia. Belarus is the first. Yeah. But America won't even let them have that, right? It's like saying America's sphere of influence is not allowed to extend down to Florida or the Keys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. This is, our America's sphere of influence is the entire sphere of the planet Earth. And Russia's sphere of influence is inside their borders for now, if they're lucky, but certainly not 1 inch outside their borders. Which is just, it's nuts. And if you know what, I went back because I was writing the speech and made sure I went back and I found the block quote from the Monroe Doctrine. President James Monroe in the year 1823, 199 years ago, gave this giant speech announcing the Monroe Doctrine that warned the European powers, whatever colonies you already have over here, fine. But you will not create any new ones. And we're not going to have any more expansionism over here. And you're not going to get between us and anybody we're doing business with over here and all these kinds of things.
Right.
And then he said, and we promise to stay out of Europe. And we promise not to pick sides in conflicts in Europe. And we promise to treat any government in charge, in any de facto rulers in Europe as legitimate as far as we're concerned. And we'll just deal with everybody in an open and honest way and not pick sides. And that was the Monroe Doctrine. stay out of the Americas and we'll stay out of Europe. And yet they just absolutely forget that part. I guess at Harvard and Georgetown, they don't teach that part, that we promise to mind our own damn business over here. And look, the Nazis are dead and gone since 1945. And the Soviet Union's been dead and gone since 1991. Fully 30 years ago now, not rounding up, 30 years ago. So that's it. We can just quit. It doesn't have to be like this at all. The fact that we're talking about having a border conflict with Russia on their border, 5,000 miles east of Washington, D.C.
It's on NATO's
ought to
border.
tell you everything you need to know.
As Hillary Clinton would say, it's on NATO's border.
Yeah, that's right. Right on NATO's doorstep. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. Someone asked me for that footnote, and I got distracted while I was trying to find it. Let me get that search started so I can get back to it later.
Well, does NATO exist without the United States?
No. Without the United States, it's France and France and Germany and maybe Britain's military alliance is what it would be. I think Britain would probably just stay with America.
But financially,
it would be the European army of France and Germany combined is who would lead it.
It'd be the EU army. Yeah, basically. It's
here it is. I don't know why this person had a hard time finding it. All I typed in was Hillary Clinton, Russia, right on NATO's doorstep, and it came right up. And it's in a major foreign policy campaign speech on June 2nd, 2016. Hillary Clinton stated Moscow's taking aggressive military action in Ukraine, right on NATO's doorstep. Oh, okay. I thought she was talking about moving troops inside the country. I'll have to find that one. NATO's door remains open to Ukraine, she said, long after the Bushes. What's that quote from?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. All right, so
2010.
Here's kind of my thought. Russia is always viewed, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, NATO's always been a threat to Russia, which, I mean, even anybody who's watched the activities since 1991 of NATO can figure out, okay, I understand why Russia's a little upset about what's going on. Mm-hmm. If NATO doesn't exist without the United States, Russia, we're coming out of this pandemic. The United States was already entering into a recessive period. It was pretty obvious what was happening economically with the United States. It was already in bad shape, and I don't care what anybody says. It doesn't matter if Biden were president or Trump were president. It would have gotten bad either way. It may not have been as bad if Trump were still president, because he wouldn't have canceled all these leases and you'd have more drilling. Okay, fine. I'll give you that. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't matter who was going to be president in 2022. The United States was going to meet some economical challenges. So watching these patterns, and I'm sure that Russia is watching these patterns. I don't think these people are stupid by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think a lot of people want to blame, oh, well, this only happened because Biden's in office and he's weak and blah, blah, blah. Okay, Biden's weak, Biden's in office. Okay, fine. I'll grant you that because I believe that. I think that's true. But I don't think it just happened because Biden's in office. I think it just happened because this was a prime time for them to put the U.S. in a situation where the U.S. would take decisive action that would actually harm the U.S. and the power of the United States, and therefore could potentially strike a fatal blow to NATO, to where financially NATO could no longer stay together. And I think that is what the ultimate goal is here.
Well, I mean, I think it was not Biden's weakness. It was Biden's recklessness. Biden had every opportunity to negotiate his way out of this. And I am more and more convinced that he wanted this to happen. Him and his government decided that they would rather see Russia invade Ukraine because they figured they had sent in enough arms in there already, and they could add enough arms that they could make it a really tough bite to chew.
Like
That
turning
they would make it
Ukraine
really
into
difficult for the
Afghanistan?
Russians, and as they say, replicate the Afghanistan war
Yeah.
there and bog them down in that. And as I said, also, they killed that peace pipeline with Germany, didn't they? They helped kick Russia right out of Europe and keep, continental Europe further under America's NATO domination.
Did
So I think that was why they did it. Now, if you're saying Putin's reaction is going to, in Ukraine, might end up breaking up NATO, I think that's possible over the medium term in the sense that, well, I think the Eastern European states are going to want to cling to NATO probably tighter than ever before. But I think there's going to have to be real debates inside these countries too, in there about, is NATO really going to come and save us if Russia comes? Pat Buchanan, I'm pretty sure it's his most recent article on antiwar.com. He says, there's this strip of land called Kaliningrad that's between the Baltic states and Poland, but it's Russian controlled territory, this little strip of land.
Yeah.
And Pat says, well, what if Putin wakes up on the wrong side of the bed in the morning and says, hey, guess what? As long as I'm killing people this week, hey, Lithuanians or Latvians, I guess I need to look at a map here. It would be Lithuanians. Hey, I want a corridor to Kaliningrad, and you're going to give it to me or I'm going to invade you. That's a pretty hard ball, and he could play it. Now the question is, what would America do about that? Would America tell Moscow that we'll go to nuclear war with you to keep you from cutting a corridor across Lithuania to Kaliningrad? Which, after all, would make it a lot easier for him to build up forces to threaten our ally Poland with. And let me ask you this. If he does build up forces in Kaliningrad and then says to the Poles, H.W. Bush, Pat didn't go this far. I'm elaborating on his same hypothetical here. H.W. Bush promised not 1 inch east of Germany. So, Poland, I hereby insist that you withdraw from NATO and adopt neutrality, or I'll invade you. Is Joe Biden really going to launch 6,000 nukes? And know that the Russians are going to also launch thousands of nukes back at us in order to prevent Russia from blackmailing Poland into adopting neutrality and dropping out of our military alliance? It's just a hypothetical question. I'm telling you, if I was president, I'd be like, screw Poland. That's a direct quote from Ronald Reagan. Not a direct one, I'm paraphrasing. Screw Poland. Ike Eisenhower said, sorry, Hungary, you're too far east. And LBJ said, sorry, Czechoslovakia, you're too far east. And Ronald Reagan said, sorry, Poland, you're too far east. You're under Soviet domination, and I'm sorry that sucks, but we're not coming for you. You should not believe that we are. H.W. Bush told the Ukrainians the same thing. We're not here. Whatever your relationship is with Moscow is between you and Moscow. Don't think you can come to me to have your back against Russia, because I don't have it. That was H.W. Bush talking straight dope to the people of Ukraine. And the answer was, listen, you're a small, weak country next to an extremely powerful one. Right next to it. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah.
Now, how are we supposed to do better than that? How does it make sense that the middle part of North America is going to give a war guarantee to Ukraine? It just doesn't. It doesn't. They're too damned far east to be our problem.
Do you think the Estonia calling for a no-fly zone over Ukraine is going to cause any ripples?
I'm sure it will. I wish they had shut the hell up. What the hell are they thinking? How incompetent are their intelligence people right now that they don't know that America's not going to do that. The U.S. Air Force and I guarantee you, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley are right now telling Joe Biden in no uncertain terms, Mr. President, no-fly zone means we all die in a nuclear war tomorrow. We cannot do a no-fly zone. That means we shoot down Russian planes. That means Russian planes shoot down our planes. That means we have to launch missiles into Russia to take out their anti-aircraft. Because again, we're talking about a fight 5,000 miles east of Washington, D.C. In other words, within the range of anti-aircraft missiles inside Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So a no-fly zone over Ukraine means bombing runs over Russia. Means nuclear war, and we all die.
Yeah.
And probably 6 out of 7 billion end up starving to death. And humanity is set back centuries.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that's what Milley is telling Biden. Sir, what are we going to do? Nothing.
You have that much faith in him?
That's all we got, man. If he's not telling Biden that, then we're dead next week, Tommy.
Yeah.
And I honestly, man, I ought to watch more TV right now. I really need to get in the habit of turn the TV back on and like keep it on mute. But occasionally there will be important statements and things on there that are kind of happening in real time that I need to keep up with. That's a fault of mine. And I, honestly, too, I've really, really fallen out of the practice of reading the Post, the Times, and the Wall Street Journal every day, which obviously is a bunch of propaganda, but it's the straight propaganda from the top of the pile. You know, this is who, if the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff tells someone to tell the newspaper something, it's going to be the Post, the Times, or the Journal. You know, that's where we're going to find out what it is they want us to think they think. And so it's my fault for not doing a good enough job of riding herd on that kind of stuff. And I think Milley has his problems, many, many problems. But one of them is not that he's a coward. I thoroughly approve of his cowardice. You know, and I say that, you know, kind of jokingly, that he's careful and smart and thorough and an adult. He's not giving. This is not like Jack Kennedy, who's got the military breathing down his neck, going, "Come on, Mr. President, we got to hit them commies now." You know, that's not what's going on here. You know, Milley is not doing that. So if you're Biden and Milley is going, hey, caution. And I'm sure, you know, I don't know that much about Lloyd Austin, but I can't imagine that he is saying, Mr. President, we have no choice but to do something insane right now. They don't seem that bad of men. You know what I mean? I don't know. I lived through the George W. Bush years, man. You know?
You would think that the only time they would go to that extent is if there were a direct threat like the Cuban Missile Crisis or something like that. I couldn't see them doing that for Ukraine. I couldn't even. But look,
at the same time, they should be solving this trouble right now, Tommy. There ain't no reason in the world that their policy should be anything but let's get a ceasefire. Let's figure out what we got to do to get a ceasefire, and let's figure out what we got to do to hammer out a goddamn deal here. What are we talking about? We're going to have a proxy war with Russia right on Russia's border? Not some asshole is. America is. Going to have a proxy war with Russia right on Russia's border? No. They are bragging about how they want to drag this out. No. They should be doing everything they can to end the war, lift all sanctions, normalize relations, invite Putin to D.C. and take him out to the opera and kiss his ass and become his friend again. This is all goddamn our government's fault in the first place anyway. They should be doing, this is what Donald Trump should have done the moment he was sworn in, is he should have fired the top 20 people at the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA, and declassified all of the Russiagate information immediately and handed it over to the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and NPR News. If I'm really a traitor with Russia, find it in there, you idiots. Then And also, you could have declassified all the information on what Hillary's campaign had to do with setting that whole thing up in the first place. And then he should have invited Vladimir Putin to Washington, D.C. And he should have told the liberals and the New York Times to go and fuck themselves. And he should have taken Putin out to dinner. And then he should have signed a bad fucking ass new nuclear treaty with him. And then he should have signed a real final status agreement for the Donbass and Crimea and neutrality for Ukraine. And then he should have figured out a way to get along with Russia on whatever outstanding issues we have in Europe. And then, and if he did that well in that first little while, if he had hired competent and decent and loyal men to serve him in the government, unlike Tillerson and Mattis and McMaster and all these scum. But if he had done that and done it well, then he could have got that ratified by the older foreign policy establishment leaders. You would have had H.W. Bush and Brent Scowcroft come out. I forgot when Scowcroft died. I think he lived very old. They would have come out and said, this is the right thing. You know, if he'd done it right, then he would have been able to get some of the older guard who want us to get along with Russia, who remember the bad old days for real and want us to get along with Russia. You know, Henry Kissinger, I 100% believe that Donald Trump told the truth when he said, I said to Henry Kissinger, hey, Henry Kissinger, I want to make friends with Russia so I can beat him, China over the head with him. Right. And Henry Kissinger said to me, Donald Trump, you're so tall and rich and smart. I agree with you. You're the world's #1 greatest winner because you thought of that great idea. That's, you know, that's him paraphrasing Henry Kissinger, right? Like, yeah, he said I was the greatest man he ever met because he agreed with me that this is the guy now who 50 years ago split China away from the Soviet Union or took advantage of their differences and opened them up to the United States and gave them, you know, kicked the Taiwanese out and gave them the Chinese seat on the UN Security Council and, you know, very belatedly and normalized relations with China. So this same guy was advocating the same scam. Right now, Russia's the weaker power. China's the stronger power. So we should take the weaker power off with us. And after all, they're white and Christian and European and no longer communists. So, you know, maybe we'll just pal around with the Russians and then that way tilt them against the Chinese. Now, I'm not saying any of this is legitimate. I'm a Ron Paul guy. Just forget all this power politics. We're not supposed to play these games. Right. Leave these games to the European powers altogether, you know, for what it's worth. That's my opinion here. But just seeing what they're talking about here, just like we're saying with Putin, what they're doing was wrong, but rational. They wanted to contain China as the rising imperial power and, you know, in the region anyway, and, you know, regional hegemon in East Asia. Mm-hmm. So we're adding countries to our containment against China policy. And why not have Russia as one of them too?
Right.
And, you know, Biden is so old and slow, he can't keep up with these kind of developments. But there was a statement of his from a few months ago where he said, yeah, let me tell you something, Bubba. You know, Russia and China share this long border, and Russia has a lot of problems with China. And he was talking about, essentially, his rhetoric was along the lines of that, you know, essentially the Russians are going to come crying to us because of their problems with China.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, that could be the case if America didn't play this game so poorly. And instead, they have, well, depending on which power faction is pulling which strings, right, Tommy? Because what you have is maybe some would like this international geopolitical strategy where we peel off the Russians to use them against the Chinese. But there are others who would just as soon have a Cold War against them both, namely Lockheed and all their friends in the think tanks, right? Oh, yeah. Why have one Cold War when you can have two? Why split one power away from the other when you can hate them both? But then the problem is we push them together. Now we're right back what you were talking about. Russia and China working together on this war, where clearly Putin went, you know, I saw on Fox News right before I was on Kennedy last night, They were interviewing some Ukrainian, and he got his PR talking points from New York City, boy. He was up there talking about China is behind this war, Kennedy. China is the reason Russia invaded Ukraine. See, we're on Fox Business Channel, right? We got to get these Fox News right wingers. They don't really care about Russia. They're looking at Russia and going, I don't know, conservative, Republican Christians run the place. What do we care? You know? But they hate China and that red flag and that yellow peril and all of that. They get excited as hell about that. Now, what's the kernel of truth there? The kernel of truth is that Putin went to Chairman Xi and said, hey, man, I'm going to Ukraine and I need to know that you've got my back and you're not going to add on a bunch of sanctions and cut me off and all this. I want to keep our economic ties strong while I take care of some business I got to take care of here. And Xi clearly told him, go ahead, I got your back, Jack, before he moved forward here. Now, you can say, oh, Xi was scheming and using Putin for his own ends here, but I just don't think that really holds up. You know, I guess he's probably like grinning and happy to see the Americans flailing and failing, you know, in a kind of broad sense. But this is clearly Putin's game here. But yes, he's absolutely got the Chinese on board for it, doesn't he?
Yeah,
and whose fault is that? All of this, you know, if America's the superpower, Tommy, then all this is our fault. All of this is on Madeleine Albright and Connolly and Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and Mike Pompeo, all these secretaries of state, right? All these people who are supposed to be the masters of the universe here. This is the result, clearly, like it's inarguable, right? It's just a scientific fact.
Yeah.
What we have now is the result of their diplomacy and failures of it, right?
Yeah.
What else do you call it? They could not find a way to make this not happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and, you know, I guess we could use Hillary Clinton's reset button right about now, you know?
That's right. And look, how did she ruin that? She immediately got Medvedev, the stand-in president, standing in for Putin for a little while Putin went to cool his heels in the Duma. And, you know, seemingly sort of kind of for PR reasons, sort of respect the constitutional system there, which he could just declare himself king, right? And he doesn't do that. But the guy that he put in his chair immediately got played like a sucker by Hillary Clinton, who convinced him, we're just going to create a no-fly zone over Benghazi, Libya, to prevent Gaddafi from killing them all there, and got him to abstain from the UN Security Council resolution authorizing that war. And then, of course, she immediately turned it into a regime change war against Gaddafi in Tripoli. And that lasted 9 months and killed tens of thousands of people and installed a bunch of Islamist bin Ladenite lunatics in power and led to ISIS taking the town of Sirte in 2015 and 16. And this massive civil war that's killed tens of thousands of people and the reinstallation of civilian chattel slave markets in that country and all of this madness. And so she just made an absolute chump out of Medvedev. And Putin then, instead of waiting 2 terms, waited only 1 term and then stepped right back into the presidency again. And that was the end of the reset right there. And who blew it? Evil, mean, bad guy Putin because of how evil and mean and bad he is? Or Hillary Clinton because of how evil and mean and bad she is? Obviously, the latter answer is the more plausible one. Anyone who knows anything about that lady, you know.
All right, I got a couple more things to cover, and then we can get off here because we've been going for a while.
Okay,
but,
man. I'll try to shut up.
No, you're good. I don't mind because everybody loves to hear you go. I feel bad when I try to interrupt you but you say things and I'm like, wait, I don't want to forget this question because this adds on to everything you're saying.
I know, and then I'm like, wait, don't interrupt me because I'll lose my train of thought and I'll never get it back because I'm such. I remember everything I read, but I cannot remember what I was just talking about. So go ahead. For some reason.
I've had a couple of my guys in my Discord. They wanted to know some things, and they asked me, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm talking to Scott. I'll ask Scott. So all right. So the Iran bombing in Iraq. What was that? What was that? Did that have anything to do with Russia? I read something that it had something to do with Mossad in Iraq.
Yeah. So here's the thing, man. Yeah, that's right. It's not about Russia, really. what it is, and it's a pretty drastic move by the Ayatollah. I'm surprised that he did it. But the good news is nobody died. If you remember when Trump killed Soleimani in early 2020, that the Ayatollah fired missiles at the empty corner of an American airbase in Iraq.
Yep.
Save a little bit of face for him, but don't do anything stupid. And then Trump let it die there. Trump did not answer there. He let the Ayatollah have the last word. Thank God. So this, I think, could be like that. No one was killed. It could very well have been deliberate that they targeted an uninhabited area of a property somewhere or whatever it was, but just to make a symbolic point. Because I think the Ayatollah, people talk about what a mean son of a bitch he is and all that. I'm sure that's true if you're caught up in his criminal justice system or his political prosecution system inside Iran or something like that. He's always been very shrewd and cautious in terms of foreign policy. Now, when George W. Bush gave him an opening, you're damn right he took Baghdad. You know what I mean? What was he going to do? Not. But
if you insist,
does he just go firing off missiles at Americans for no reason and without calculating very cautiously? No, he does not do that. So here's what happened was the Israelis bomb Iranian military shipments to Assad and to their friends Hezbollah, the Shiite militia in kind of mini state in southern Lebanon. And so there's this constant flow of weapons, and the Israelis bomb as much of it as they can in Syria, and Syria doesn't do anything about it because what the hell are they going to do about it? They just sit there and take it. But this time, some Iranian, I guess, Quds Force officers, that's their revolutionary, that's the special operations arm of their special operations arm, I guess, the Revolutionary Guards Corps, Guard Corps, the Quds Forces, their special operations forward teams. And so then this was retaliation against that. And they hit a base in Erbil, Kurdistan in northern Iraq, where they alleged, I think probably pretty credibly, that the Israelis have a secret base there. And so that's what they hit. And then, as I say, apparently they didn't kill anyone. And hopefully, and I think likely, that was deliberate. And so they got to have their last word, and then hopefully nobody's going to kill anybody else based on nobody getting killed here this time.
Right.
But now I have to say, because now that you brought it up, I can't help it, Tommy, that this is the way it works, man, is that, look, dude, picture a map real good in your head right now, the Middle East and how all this works. You got Iraq right in the middle of everybody, right?
Yeah.
So Israel's problem, Tommy, was that Iran helps Syria back Hezbollah, right? From east to west here. But as you can see in your brain, there's a giant Iraq in the way. Saddam Hussein is the block between Iran and Syria and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, right? But these damn stupid, idiot, evil neocons, who are as evil and guilty as they are stupid, stupidly believed because Ahmed Chalabi, the Iraqi exile who worked for the Iranians, told them that if you overthrow Saddam Hussein, then the king of Jordan will dominate Iraq. And don't worry, I know he's also a minority Sunni leader, and he'll be coming in from a foreign country trying to supplant Saddam. But it'll be fine because guess why? The Shiites love to bend over and take orders from anybody who claims to share the blood of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Hashemites in Jordan, the Sunni minority they're the majority in Jordan, but the Hashemite Sunni kingdom from Jordan, they will be able to just waltz right into Baghdad, and all the Iraqi Shia will then essentially be their slaves and do whatever they're told. And so then, I know this is stupid, please bear with me. Then the new Sunni Hashemite kingdom will order the Shiite religious clergy in Najaf to order Hezbollah to stop being friends with Iran and start being friends with Israel. And then it'll be the Israeli, Jordanian, Turkish axis will rule the Middle East and dominate Mesopotamia, and the Syrian regime and Hezbollah will be tamed, and the Syrian regime will be on the outs, and Iran will be helpless. And David Wormser wrote this in A Clean Break and in Coping with Crumbling States, and in his book, Tyranny's Ally, America's Failure to Remove Saddam Hussein, with a foreword by Richard Burr. So these stupid, evil, idiot neocons, the core ringleaders of the men who lied us into war in Iraq 20 years ago, this is what the hell they thought they were doing, Tommy. They were going to break Iran away from Hezbollah by getting rid of Iran's greatest regional nemesis, Sunni Saddam Hussein. And of course, that ain't what happened at all, is it? No. When they started that war, instead, America put the Iranian Revolution in power in Baghdad. And Iran's very closest partisan parties, the Supreme Islamic Council and Dawa Party, have ruled Baghdad ever since 2005. And when America put them in there and fought the whole damn civil war to cleanse all the Sunnis out of the Shiite East and leave them all to burn out in the sun out in the West in their so-called strong federalism program and all of this. And then all that happened was Iran's power was strengthened in Iraq. Then, as you know, Obama backed the bad guys, the bin Ladenites, the Sunni radicals in Syria to try to make up for the failure of this policy. Well, if getting rid of Saddam Hussein only made Iran more powerful in terms of their relationship with Syria and Hezbollah, damn. Well, I guess we got to get rid of Assad. And he, as the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, said, Assad in Syria is the keystone in the arc of power between Iran and Hezbollah. So now that's what we got to do is regime change against Assad. But now you know what happened there? That blew up into the Islamic State Caliphate with this guy Baghdadi, who might as well have been Osama bin Laden himself, standing up there declaring himself the Caliph Ibrahim, ruler of all good and true Muslims, and certainly all of East Syria and West Iraq. So then they had to go to Iraq War III to blow up the Islamic State and fight that same war on the side of the Shia they wish they hadn't fought Iraq War II for. And make Iran even more powerful in Iraq than ever before, and the Iraqi government more dependent on Iran than ever before, and to make the government in Syria more dependent on Iran and Hezbollah than ever before. And all of them now battle-hardened warriors together after fighting against Obama and Osama's jihad in Syria for years. And so for now 25 years since David Wormser wrote that crap, and that became the basis of the whole PNAC project, that we've got to get back into Iraq one way or the other. That's all they've been doing this whole time, Tommy, is trying to screw over the Iranians. And the whole time, all they do is keep making them more and more and more powerful. And all to try to stop Iran from selling weapons to Hezbollah, who wouldn't even exist except for the way that Israel invaded and occupied Lebanon in 1982 and waged a terror campaign against the Lebanese Shia civilians for no reason whatsoever, who had nothing to do with their conflict with Yasser Arafat. And just the party of God, Hezbollah, came, essentially out of the ether to come and fight a new insurgency against the Israeli occupiers. So the Israelis have completely created this monster for themselves in the first place. And they've had America trying to help them make up for that mistake ever since then. And all they've done is make it worse and worse and worse and worse. And now here we are halfway through, God dang, February 2022, talking about Americans almost got killed by Iranians shooting at Israelis in Kurdistan. God dang it, Bobby. This ain't supposed to be like this. Don't you know that? And we ain't supposed to do that. We could have got the hell out of. They finished smashing the Islamic State excuse in 2017.
Are we still?
Let's come home, man.
Is the U.S. still carrying out operations in Iraq?
I think so. I don't know against who. I mean, they say that they're still fighting In fact, I think I read that they claim that they haven't gone out on missions against the Islamic State in a while now. What's left of the ISIS insurgency there. For that project, they would be, partnered up with the government in Baghdad, I guess possibly with the Kurdish Peshmerga, or maybe just going out on their own, doing limited missions.
Right.
But they're a huge possible tripwire for war here, man. On the Kennedy show, she tried to ask me about this last night, but she had 2 Iran questions and 1 Ukraine question, and we got 4 minutes. So she brought up 2 Iran topics, but I only got to answer 1 question. That was about the nuclear program. But I wasn't able to address the issue of the fact that our guys in Iraq right now are a major tripwire for war. Think about the conversation we're having. What if you were saying to me, Scott, the Iranians fired missiles at Erbil, Kurdistan, and they killed 25 of our guys? And I'm worried that Joe Biden's going to attack them now. Yeah. Think about the conversation we'd be having if the Ayatollah's aim was off by a little bit. And they killed a bunch of Americans and hell, a bunch of Israelis.
Because it was close to an embassy.
It could be at war right now.
It was close to an American embassy where
yeah.
they were firing.
Well, they always exaggerate that kind of shit. That happens all the time. Like, oh, look, it landed like over there, and you can see where it landed from the consulate. So we think maybe it was directed at the consulate. They're kind of
because like there were people saying that it was like it hit the street outside the consulate and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe. It could be. But point remaining that, like, yeah. So what if the Ayatollah was a little bit angrier? What if he was the absolute insane sick son of a bitch that they said he was all the time? He could have killed a bunch of our guys, and we could be in a real ass war with Iran right now. Talking about B-52s getting shot down over Iran, trying to carpet bomb Tehran, or some, absolutely insane red notebook off the shelf plan for some kind of full-scale war in the event of a crisis like that with Iran. What's Joe Biden, the big, dumb, old wimp, going to do if the Ayatollah kills 25 of our guys? He's going to kill just 25 of theirs back? Or just forget it? We're on the road to a full-scale war with Iran now.
Yeah.
Over when our guys don't even belong there at all now,
right.
in the year 2022.
We've talked about that before. Like a full-scale war with Iran would that would be insane. Like invading Iran would be so expensive, and never even mind invading with a land army, but even just a real full-scale air war against them would cost thousands of troops, airmen, and I was gonna say it would cost $1 billion plus shit tons of lives. Like it's not a feasible.
Yeah, $1 billion. Nothing. It'd be a hell of a lot worse than that, man. It'd be a $1 trillion catastrophe.
Yeah, you thought if people thought Afghanistan was a quagmire, like this would be worse than Vietnam.
And look, seriously, we just have no reason to be like this anymore. We could just get along right now with the Ayatollah. We could just drop all this.
Would you be surprised? Because I one of the things I've been thinking is because of the way that things are lining out with Russia, I wouldn't be shocked if Iran's not interested in a deal. If they're just luring the U.S. along while they go ahead and make a nuclear weapon, because
no, they're not making nukes, man. I'm telling you. Here's the thing.
Maybe they're not, but I wouldn't blame them if they were. You know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't either, but I got to tell you, here's the thing about it, man. They have a treaty already, Tommy, the non-proliferation treaty. Mm-hmm. They have a safeguards agreement. So with or without the Obama deal that Trump tore up, it doesn't matter. They're already verified to not have a nuclear weapons program. And if they broke out and tried to turn their civilian nuclear program into a weapons program, we would know it immediately. Okay. So when Obama did this, it was really superfluous is what it was. It was an extra layer of inspections and restrictions on a program that was already a civilian program, was never meant to make nuclear weapons anyway. I'll tell you what it is. It's a latent, well, first of all, it's an electricity program. But secondly, it is a latent deterrent. It's sort of like saying, I got a revolver in one pocket and I got bullets in the other pocket. But so, hey, let's not get in an argument tonight where I feel like loading my gun. You know what I mean? We're just gonna sit here and have beers and not fight. How about that? That's what it is. So Brazil and Japan have the same capacity, right? They've proven as kind of middle rank powers. They've proven that they know, well, Japan's more than middle rank power. They know how to enrich uranium. And if they have to, they know how to burn it and get plutonium waste and either make an implosion bomb out of that, or at least take highly enriched uranium and make a simple gun type nuke if they want to make a simple gun type uranium nuke.
Right.
They know, they have demonstrated they have the capability. Now, the Iranians, they could not make a plutonium implosion bomb. They have no ability to reprocess plutonium, even if they burned a bunch of plutonium in their heavy water reactor, which they already poured concrete into their heavy water reactor. So,
right.
But too late for that one, Ayatollah. Can't take that back. But even if they did, the plutonium could be harvested and used and made for weapons fuel. However, it takes a very sophisticated reprocessing, system and process to do it, and they don't have the facility. It doesn't even exist in Iran. They never even built one in the first place. So they're very far from the ability. So in other words, they forget the ability to make a plutonium bomb. They could only make a uranium gun type nuke, which would be huge and heavy. And what are they going to do? Put it on the back of a flatbed truck, put it in a civilian airliner somewhere in Kamikaze somewhere. Something.
They'll probably pick up one of those. They'll probably pick up one of those B-52s sitting in fucking Afghanistan that we abandoned.
Nah, they bombed all their equipment. Most of the heavy equipment they left behind, they bombed it on the way out. I'd like to see footage of that. Wouldn't that be some great footage of our guys carpet bombing their own bases and all their trucks and planes and helicopters and shit? Jesus, this has got to be the most ramshackle, ridiculous empire. But yeah, no, listen, don't fear an Iranian nuke, man. The Ayatollahs, the mean old Ayatollahs said, the Bible forbids it. We're not doing it. God forbids it. And so say the chief. And then his successor, the current Ayatollah, Khamenei, has said the same thing. It's an official fatwa. And now I'm not saying you got to believe what a politician says. He could change his mind tomorrow. But I am saying that clearly is this edict. And that clearly has been the policy in Iran this whole time. Is, when Bush said the axis of evil, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, they're all nuclear weapons threats, and we're going to have to take them all on. Saddam was like, dude, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. North Korea was like, don't you try me, because I will make a fucking nuke.
Yeah, exactly.
And and Iran said, bullshit, pal. My hands are up. My books are wide open, and all the Europeans can see it. Everybody's watching you. You can't fucking shoot me now. You can't say I reached for my waistband, dude. My hands are by my ears, right? That was their whole policy from the time that Bush named them the axis of evil. After September 11th, they said, we'll do whatever you say. This is our chance to be best friends again. You want to be best friends again? Let's kill Al-Qaeda and Taliban together. Let's kill Saddam together. What the hell, right? Yeah. And then Bush told them, hell no. Bush fought a whole war for them in Iraq War II and refused to talk to them the whole time. When that whole war was for them. Sucker, idiot.
Yeah, no, I don't fear Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I'm not as.
Oh, I didn't mean to say you were afraid of cat. I was just saying as a turn of phrase.
Yeah, no, I get it. I just can't help but think, like, why wouldn't they at this point? Everybody who's abandoned the idea of getting nuclear weapons gets killed. So.
Well, except that, frankly, their hands up, don't shoot policy has worked so far. In other words, by the time Obama added the JCPOA, him and all the UN Security Council powers, everybody knew that this is bullshit. Right. Everybody knew that we don't even need to do this. We already have a nuclear deal. All we're talking about now is how much further can we get the Iranians to restrict their program to make it harder and harder and harder for them to make a nuke if they ever decide to make one. That was the only thing that was really at issue there. And they all knew that. So there was not much, pretension there. But the thing is, before that, the fucking Israelis and the Republican hawks and the Democrats too, I guess, they would just pretend like the NPT didn't exist. they would just pretend like they never heard of the IAEA or Safeguards Agreement or any of these inspections. And they would just say, nuclear weapons program, like they're just trying to elbow past you with their bullshit instead of like even making a real case. You know what I mean? But I think, again, so Saddam also was like, hands up, I'm not doing anything, but he wasn't good enough at PR to make that stick or whatever. They were able to make it seem like he was guilty of something to enough people, I guess.
Yeah.
They bullied the North Koreans, and Kim Jong-il said, fuck you then, and withdrew from the NPT and started making nuclear weapons. They got about 24 of them now, according to most estimates, and have multiple successful tests of them.
Right.
And well, that's another story, but I'll tell you that story someday about how that was 100% Bush and John Bolton's fault for making that happen. The way they tried to bully North Korea, and immediately it blew up in their face. The Ayatollah did not do that. The Ayatollah was like, look, man, I'm trying to be reasonable with you guys. You don't shoot at me. I won't make a nuke. You guys want to deal in good faith? I'll negotiate with your European Union friends. You want to negotiate in good faith? I'll negotiate with you. But all this, we're not allowed to have uranium at all, is a non-starter. Obama dropped that. Obama said, okay, look, you're going to have a civilian program, but we just want it super duper restricted.
Well,
so, in other words, this is all very nuanced and shades of gray and details of the thing. But essentially, we didn't even need the JCPOA at all. It was just almost all public relations to finally put the fake controversy to bed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So they were trying to make a big deal out of it the other day because, I think Khamenei went to Russia and to visit with Putin. And I remember out of the JCPOA that part of the agreement where they were going to be buying, what is it? Is it dirty uranium? I don't remember the term.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
Part of the deal is the Russians take the Iranian spent fuel.
There you go. Yeah,
so that there's not a risk that they're going to turn that into nuclear weapons.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I want to get into this story that hit the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read it or not, but I'll give you the breakdown of it. It's pretty simple. The Wall Street Journal reported that the Saudi Arabia had agreed with China to start buying start selling oil to China for the yuan, however.
Oh, I only saw the headline. The Saudis talking about diversifying out of the dollar. Yeah, we'll see about that, boy. Well, you know what? America puts up with a lot of shit for Saudi Arabia, but it does so for a reason.
Saudi Arabia has come out and said that this is not true. So Wall Street Journal reported it, and Saudi Arabia says it is not a fact. Now, I've been saying for a couple of years that what we're looking at with China talking about overtaking U.S. as an economic strong point is they're looking at a position to where they can be in to dump American bonds. And if China dumps the U.S. bonds, the amount of U.S. bonds that China holds will collapse the dollar. So
yeah, and that'll collapse their entire economy too, though. So it's
probably,
like the old saying about if you owe a man, or if a man owes you $1,000, he's in big trouble. If a man owes you $1 million, you're in big trouble, kind of thing. So, sorry, that's such a shitty cliche, but in other words, they own so much of our debt that if they start dumping it to get rid of it, they're gonna lose the value of all the stuff that they're still holding that they haven't gotten rid of yet. You know what I mean? So they're going to be shooting themselves in both feet too.
What I'm wondering, and this is like my real curiosity here is if there's no standard, if the dollar's not backing every currency in every country in the world, is there any intrinsic value? Therefore, could the country itself set its own value, right? And
No,
and
I mean,
flood
look,
and
nothing's intrinsic. Everything is subjective. So, the government can try to peg their currencies to each other at whatever rates, but the market's got to buy it. This is where George Soros made all his money. As Margaret Thatcher tried to insist that a pound sterling was worth this many euros, and whatever it was. And George Soros saw that that was just bullshit. That was like her hubris that just insisted that the pound was worth more than it was. So he just started betting against it and betting against it and betting against it. And he was known as the man who broke the Bank of England,
yeah.
which is a pretty good thing to do, for an evil son of a bitch. And so, that's the thing about it, right? Like that kind of arbitrage is like, that's what happens. If you try to manipulate this stuff too much, someone can always find the hole in the market where they can profit by equalizing it back out again, you know?
I'm just wondering if what happens if like to US currency. Like cuz like I don't know.
Here's the thing, man. I'm not this
I
good of an
don't think
economist, Tommy. I don't know. But I'll tell you this, dude. I talked to Robert Higgs years ago, and he told me that he didn't think that the American dollar was pegged on Saudi Arabia or anyone else promising to denominate their sales in dollars. That essentially every currency in the world sucks. And the US is an extremely strong one, or the strongest one, because of the economy behind it, because of the credible threat, essentially. I'm paraphrasing Bob way out of turn here, but something like, because of the credible threat of the IRS will tax our asses to pay the bondholders and to pay interest to the bondholders for their paper. And that as long as that is true, that if you're a central banker anywhere in the world, that you can count on that. That since Alexander Hamilton, America's government pays the people who hold its debt most of the time. And so other currencies are not quite as stable historically and have had, you think about all the boom and the bust crisis we were talking about earlier, but you're still talking about 50 states and hundreds of millions of productive people cranking out awesome, expensive shit all the time. So, all the universities we have, all the engineering power and brain power and manpower and natural resources of every description. They talk about the resource curse when a country just has a lot of oil or a lot of timber or a lot of one thing, and it just ruins the country because a few get rich and everybody else is screwed. And then there's a civil war and a bunch of horrible shit.
right.
We got all the middle part of North America, man. We got all the rivers and all the timber and all the oil and every different kind of stone that you could need to stack on top of each other to make shit out of, and all the iron ore and everything we could ever need, even right here. And not that we need to be an autarky or anything, but I'm just saying, America is such a wealthy place that it's a backstop for a lot of debt. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like if you're just a businessman in the world, libertarians like to talk about how the dollar has lost so much of its value since 1913. And hell, you could talk a lot about how much of its value has been lost just in the last year or two, right?
Yeah.
But before that, traditionally, we have the CPI is always rigged, but says that it's pretty low, and the real point is that, over a long enough period of time, it becomes irrelevant how much it's decreased in its purchasing power, right? What really matters is that you can rely on it to be worth this week what it was last week, and the same thing next week. You know what I mean? Over or months, over shorter periods of time. Because if you're dealing, especially in larger quantities of money, this always really sucks for low-end wage earners. If you're dealing in large quantities of money, you just take into account the inflation rate, and that's just part of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
They can just essentially kind of adjust and rationalize it.
You don't
But
think? Do you think that if China were to have made a deal with India, Pakistan, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, that it could afford the 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 debt that it would incur if it were to dump U.S. bonds?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know nearly enough about the numbers, man. But I'll tell you what, even just getting through all of those sovereign governments, you've got to get to agree on that.
Yeah.
To try to make that happen. And
I'm
look
just
at what
wondering if they
basket
don't
cases
just
they are.
all hate America enough to do it.
Well, think about how much resentment there is for the Germans pulling the weight for the Italians in the European Union. You know, how about getting everybody to agree when you're talking about China and India and Pakistan and Russia, just those alone all working together.
Mm.
I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but stable and, truly productive. I don't know, man.
I
Could be.
don't know.
Again, American foreign policy sure gives everybody a reason to hate us and spite us. Just as you're
exactly. That's
saying.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But how much is that really worth, dude? Hate and spite ain't worth that much compared to actual business.
Oh,
getting done,
man, no, I disagree with that. Like, all right,
Yeah.
so
Depends on the circumstance.
Well, because I was in the military and I was in basic training, and one thing I figured out was when you're going through basic training, what they're trying to do is they're trying to centralize your focus around an enemy so that you come together to fight that enemy as a single unit, right? So that creates this brotherhood because you all have the same enemy, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend type deal. And so they use that psychologically. And so you go into basic training, like let's say I was in a group of 60 people. I didn't know any of them when I went in there. But by the time it was over, we were really, really close friends. And it was because the drill sergeant spent so much time making us hate them that we had that common ground to stand on and created bonds based around that common ground. How long has America been that evil empire, so to speak, that has pissed people off? Like, has it been long enough for them to create that common ground to say, we will stand together just to defeat this monster?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not saying that they don't have reason to want to. I don't know that it really makes sense for them to do it that way. I think the Americans are betting that go ahead, screw you. Go ahead and team up Russia, China, and India together. America and the EU far outclass that in terms of economic productivity and military and political power and persuasion on the planet. You can have Asia, the eastern half of it.
Not when you're a net consumer.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's the question, though.
I mean,
right?
that's
the
like what it
how do the
boils
sovereign
down to.
government see it?
Yeah.
The sovereign government see it like, what can they get away with?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
They don't care about us.
Yeah. All right, man.
I don't know, dude.
It's just interesting questions. I'll
tell you what. Here's what it is, Tommy. I mean, all this essentially revolves around this so-called Thucydides trap, where if empire is falling, it has to fight the new rising power. But that's just crazy. Like, you could extrapolate this out. I'll start with Hornberger, man. Hornberger, I used to ask him on the show. I'd be like, look, man, what if I had magic powers and I just completely abolished the national security state? Millions of people, all of them just fired. Like, wouldn't that cause a Great Depression and be horrible and terrible? Like, so we got to somehow do this slowly or something. What do you think? Yeah. And Hornberger's like, nuts to that, man. All of that wealth that is distributed by the military mechanism, that's all wasted, dude. That's all money being pissed right up a rope, man. So if you fired all those people and they had to get real jobs, then the wealth that was being wasted and taken from the taxpayers and put into the Pentagon, all that wealth would still be there. Only now it would be available for, production in actual capital goods. And these people would be actually producing wealth, not just weapons of destruction that serve no other purpose. And then they would be immediately adding to the economy. So like, yeah, maybe we'll have a recession and a little bit of structural unemployment for some period of time. But in his prediction, not very damn long, that we could just do without it. It'd be fine. And I think that's kind of the answer to all of this too, dude. Extrapolate it out. What if we lost dollar hegemony? All right. What if we had to fire the entire national security state? What if we had to fire 99% of the national government? It was just back down to George Washington and his tiny little kitchen cabinet up there, and start all damn over again. Yeah, so what? That'd be fine. Why would we be afraid of that?
Right.
When we're not supposed to be an empire anyway.
Right.
We're supposed to have a nuclear war with Russia over whether we or they dominate far Eastern Europe. We're supposed to have a nuclear war with China over whether we or they dominate the South China Sea. But this is the middle part of North America. This is the new world. And that's the old world over there. And those are their problems. That if we had any honest role in at all, it would be simply in hosting peace conferences with no dog in the fight and just trying to solve the problem. Nobody wants to see a nuclear war over Kashmir. Let us see what we can possibly do to help India and Pakistan negotiate this thing. But of course, everybody knows that if America was doing that, it's just because they're trying to split Pakistan away from China and get them to gang up. You know what I mean? It'd be just some cynical, evil thing. Yeah. It's just like it is with everything. And so, I really think it's not a Thucydides trap if we just abandon empire, because empire is stupid and suicidal anyway, and everybody knows that, dummy. And so let's just not do it, and then we'll just quit. And then we don't give a shit if the Chinese are dominating the South China Sea. Who in America, if you grabbed a guy in Kansas and said to him, "Hey man, did you hear the Chinese are dominant in the South China Sea?" He would say to you probably, "Oh yeah,
that kind of makes sense."
I mean, that's, you know what? I don't know. So why should we have a fight about that? Any more than they're over here picking a fight over whether we dominate the waters in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
I don't think there's any question about whose Navy rules the Gulf of Mexico. Hell, our Navy doesn't even bother because they're not even needed. Right. There are no pirates. There's nobody there's not a security threat of any kind in the Gulf of Mexico. You know what I mean? You got a small base in Corpus Christi. I don't know what they got in Galveston or what, but whatever they do have on the Texas Gulf Coast is just for show. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just to spend that money, not to actually do anything with it. So no one questions that. Why should we fight over the South China Sea? Or why should we fight over, as Pat Buchanan says, what we always used to call the Ukraine, this region of Russia? This is east of Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe, I might give you Slovakia, but really Hungary. Hell, Austria was neutral in the Cold War. So let me look. So my vision isn't quite as good as it was. So you got Austria and then, I guess Hungary and so it's, Hungary, it's like Austria, then Slovakia, then Ukraine. So Austria was neutral before. Now we're two full countries and all the way to the eastern border of Ukraine on the far side of Slovakia from Austria. Nah, that doesn't sound right to me and probably not to anybody listening to this thing.
It doesn't make any sense. All right. So one last question, then we'll call it quits. Because we have been going for a while and
sorry about that.
It's both of us. We could talk forever on. I can't tell you how many times we jumped on the phone. That's why we don't talk on the phone much, because it always turns into
saving it up for the interview.
Yeah, well, it turns into a 6-hour thing. All right, so when it comes to, I know you say you're not the best economist, but I just want you to think about this because it's something I'm thinking about. If it comes to a point where all this money starts flowing back to the U.S., right?
Uh-huh.
Like part of what's, I think I was talking to Mike Maharry a while back, and we were talking
Great
about.
Mike Maharry.
Oh, I love Mike. We were talking about one of the things that saved inflation from being out of control is so many of the dollars are not in the U.S.
Right.
Like, so if all this money starts flowing back into the U.S., do you think we can eliminate the money as fast as we printed it to keep hyperinflation from affecting everybody?
I mean, only by raising interest rates up through the roof, but they really painted themselves in a corner, right? Where if they do that, the interest on the national debt will be so high that they won't be able to even pay their federal budget for a year, and they'll be in a total crunch.
So even like,
I don't know.
So in order to deflate the dollar, you have to raise the interest rates. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you can't just eliminate the zeros.
Or you could just raise taxes really high, would also be extremely deflationary.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's why
just raise regulations and make the cost of doing business extremely high, other things like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I know. I was just thinking, I was like, well, they just add these zeros. Can they just take the zeros away? Like,
well, a lot of it is a bookkeeping trick. Yes. In fact, at one point, oh, hell, I'm sorry, man. It's so late. My brain shut down.
No, I know.
There was a thing where Ron Paul was talking about how much of the federal debt is we pay interest on the debt to all of holders of the debt, but that includes the Federal Reserve that holds all this debt. And then the Treasury pays them plus interest. And then all that money, supposedly the extra money beyond their operating expenses, supposedly is supposed to go right back to the Treasury again anyway. And just Ron was talking about what a huge waste of money this was. I'm sure I'm screwing that story up somehow. It was something like that. But he was saying, listen, there's a couple of $1 trillion, a few $1 trillion worth of this debt that we could just cross off of both sides of the ledger. It wouldn't even exist at all. And I remember, someone like the CNBC types going, hey, that actually makes sense. Like they're supposed to not like him or listen to him, but they're like, no, actually, he's right that we could do that or something. Of course, they never did. But
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there are some things that could be done. See, the problem is, man, so many of these questions, we approach it from the point of view of like, what if we had competent men of goodwill in charge and they were trying to do the right thing to protect our nation or something? Like, that's a really bad premise for a question. You know what I mean? Like, the question is, what are these assholes going to do? And we have no idea. It's going to be bad.
Just like somebody like take one for the team and take all that cash and stuff it in your mattress and get it out of circulation for us for a while.
Yep.
Seriously. But all right, man. Well, let's call it quits. I'm getting tired too. It's been a long day.
It has, man. I've done so many damn interviews today, and I got a big old goddamn thing I got to do all day tomorrow.
I scheduled you for 9 on purpose because I wanted to have as much time with you as I wanted.
Good. Well, you got me.
Yeah.
And always great to talk with you, man. And give my best to the missus too, please.
I will. I think she's gone to bed already. She was finishing up dinner whenever I came in here, so she was like, peace out.
All right. Great to talk to you again, Tommy, as always, man.
All right, brother. We have a good night.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the things that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the times that I've taken our freedom. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the times that I've taken our freedom. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the times that I've taken our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the times